Curious about a case that could wreck your workplace? Lucky for you, we have a lawyer on the clock.
So, Phil, I'm going to just talk about a few new state laws that all HR folks should get familiar with, and then when I get past these first few, I'm going to talk about Illinois in particular because I know we have a ton of listeners who are in Illinois or have Illinois operations. So there's several new laws that are taking place in Illinois. The first one I'll start with, of course, is the Missouri minimum wage. We know that the Missouri minimum wage increased as of yesterday, $13.75, I believe.
1375, yeah.
Is that number. And now we know we have the looming Missouri sick leave law. Now there has been litigation filed over this entire law, the minimum wage piece, the sick leave piece. But the courts, I know you had a guest on in my absence a week ago or a couple weeks ago, and the lawyer who was on is the lawyer that actually filed the litigation challenging the legislation itself. Nothing happened the last 2 weeks with that lawsuit. No courts have stayed the increase in the minimum wage. I think the real focus of the lawsuit is the sick leave portion, and that's not set to go into effect until May. And so I do think we will hear from the courts well in advance of that piece going into effect, whether it will actually go into effect or not.
Yeah. So the advice is you have to change your minimum wage, $13.75. Let's not fool around with it, and then we can work on where we go next with what we understand that comes out of the court system. Yeah,
that's exactly right. So some quick hitters for you, and I'm mentioning California and New York in particular because those states are quite aggressive and progressive in their employment laws. And what they do is they hope that employers who are operating across the country nationally sort of say, all right, if we have to do this in California or New York, we'll just adopt this for everywhere that we have employees. And they hope to force change, even though the laws are limited just to those states. They hope to force employers or encourage employers to adopt these sweeping protections. So the first one is there's a new law that went into effect in California that breaks ground on what's called intersectional bias. And that updates existing laws that prohibit discrimination.
Wait, say that in. What is intersectional bias? All right.
Intersectional bias.
What does that even mean?
I'll get there,
okay.
Phil. You know I will.
All right.
So it updates their existing laws that prohibit discrimination in employment, housing, public accommodations, and education to state that those laws also forbid bias based on a combination of two or more protected characteristics. So while this law probably doesn't really actually change that much on how the law is interpreted, it just makes it that parts of the state's laws that bar discrimination on protected characteristics, race, sex, religion, sexual orientation, and national origin, it creates an analytical framework that sets forth the different forms of inequality operate together to exacerbate each other and can result in amplified forms of prejudice and harm. There's the answer for you, Phil. Do you know what that means?
You just don't discriminate, and I think we're okay. I mean,
Yes.
It's just that easy to me. I mean, having two or more, you're not supposed to have one or more.
Yeah.
So just keep it simple if we break it down. But
yeah, I think in practice, it's probably not going to change a whole heck of a lot, but just be aware that that's out there. Moving across the country in New York. New York is expanding its paid sick leave mandates to include a new bank of 20 hours that pregnant workers can tap for the purpose of obtaining pregnancy-related medical care without them having to dip into their existing allotment of paid sick time. So this is a new bank of time for New York employers.
And that's paid time, yes?
Correct. Paid sick
so
time.
Pregnant workers get an additional 20 hours of paid time for pregnancy care.
That's exactly right.
Okay. All right.
Let's go back out to California. California also has a new law that went into effect yesterday that expands workplace protections for people who are victims of violent crimes or abuse and allows them to take job protected leave to help family members who have been victims of violent acts. So just know that that one's taking place out in California. Connecticut, going back across the country, is this one, they've really expanded their state's paid leave sick requirements. Businesses that employ 25 or more workers must begin complying with the sick leave law this year. Next year, employers with at least 11 employees will fall under the state sick leave law. And then in 2027, businesses all the way down to those with a single employee must be in compliance, like I said, in 2027. So that
if you
just kind of
single
shows those
employee,
trends.
if I work for myself, I have to give myself sick leave. Yes.
Exactly. Mandatory paid sick leave for yourself, Phil.
I like it. Hey, I
Yes.
mean, it's just getting out of control. I'm all for sick leave. Don't get me wrong. I'm not against sick leave in this, but it's the ridiculous approach that we take.
Yes. Yes. All right. So then let's shift gears and let's focus on Illinois. We've talked about Missouri. We've talked about some of the trends across the country. Let's really focus on Illinois now. So Illinois has a law that just went into effect called on the subject of caregiver provisions, and it makes it unlawful for employers to discriminate against or harass employees based on their family caregiving responsibilities. So the legislation adds family responsibilities as a protected class under the Illinois Human Rights Act. It makes it unlawful to refuse to hire, deny a promotion, or discharge an employee based on the employee's actual or perceived responsibility to provide personal care to a family member. Okay, so that's pretty expansive.
Okay, so this is, break that down just a little bit. So an employee who has to give care to a family member, and you're talking about where they work in the same place?
No, I'm talking about if they have to care for a child or if they have to care for a parent. I believe the legislation says if they have to provide personal care to a family member, then that is a protected class. You cannot discriminate against somebody who has to provide that.
Okay, and that would be outside of family medical leave.
Correct.
Or
Because
in
family
addition
medical
to,
leave is federal, of course, and this would be a state law. You
State.
just can't discriminate against them or harass them based on their family caregiving responsibilities.
and make sure it's not intersectional.
Yeah, well, that would be California, yes.
I'm just making my point of craziness here. It's the new year. I still feel a little giddy from New Year's Eve. So
Yeah,
you keep going. I'm not trying to throw you off here, Bert.
That's all right. The hard part with this one's going to be, of course, when you have an employee who's absent from work because they have quote unquote family responsibilities. Can you take adverse employment action against them? And that's going to be the hard part in dealing with that piece of legislation. For anyone who wants to look that up, it's House Bill 2161. There's also another House bill that was passed and signed into legislation, and that prohibits Illinois employers from discriminating against employees for actual or perceived reproductive health decisions. The law defines reproductive health decisions broadly as a person's decisions regarding the person's use of contraception, fertility, sterilization care, assisted reproductive technologies, miscarriage management care, health care related to the continuation or termination of pregnancy or prenatal, intranatal, or postnatal care. So just be aware that that one exists out there.
That one seems to have, I want to be careful in how we tread into this because we're always trying to be careful in this, but is there an element of transgender care in that? Do you think? You start peeling that back and the way you describe that, I also think I might at least have that in my mind over here as you're reading the reproductive care.
Yeah. That I'm not sure if that'll implicate any transgender issues. I'm sure somebody with some creativity will find a way to bring a claim under that. And again, I guess if a person was born a female and is now transgender, but has the proper insides to reproduce, then you could maybe end up with some sort of claim there, but that would be speculative at this point.
Sure. Yep. Okay.
All right. A few others in Illinois. Last year, there's a new child labor law that changes the hours that minors are allowed to work, specifies additional prohibited occupations for minors, and adds a provision prohibiting discrimination and retaliation. So be aware that the Illinois child labor laws have been modified. Illinois also enacted a new law called the Worker Freedom of Speech Act, and that prohibits employers from holding mandatory meetings concerning religious or political matters, including discussions on union representation. My hunch on that one is that that's going to be preempted by the National Labor Relations Act. And if that gets challenged in court, I think that that law would get stricken down. Illinois also amended its Equal Pay Act to require employers with at least 15 employees to include pay scale and benefits in all job postings. So keep that one in mind. And then the last one I'm going to mention here, Phil, is that there's a new law that went into place that creates several employment protections for individuals when employers use the federal E-Verify system. Employers that continue to use E-Verify must incorporate new requirements into their employment verification practices so that they do not impose work authorization requirements greater than those required under federal law.
All right. It's just like our state of Illinois just keeps on adding to it. I mean, it's getting so difficult. I really do have a lot of empathy for the leaders in Illinois who are trying to manage that. And I know, and working with our AIM members, I mean, they are just trying to do the right thing here. We're not trying to get over on the law. It's just navigating all of those obstacles as you go through to, making decisions. And I think it leads to a lot of the questions and complications that it gets to do business there.
It is very difficult. And I think I'll just mention, Phil, real quickly, that if anybody goes out there and they Google Ogletree Deakins and then the title of a great article that was published 3 or 4 days ago by my firm, Key State Laws Set to Take Effect on January 1, 2025. It lists the key state laws in the various states and has actual links to the new laws that are going into effect, including all of those in Illinois. So anybody who wants to learn more, please go look at that article that's out there, click on those links, and maybe next week we can take some questions on some of those.
Yeah, it's and I know we've been navigating them quite a bit, but it is just complicated. And if you do have questions, you can always submit those as well to Bert and I by clicking on the question mark or barcode scan. Producer Nick's got all kinds of methods for you to participate depending on how you absorb our program. And we'll be happy to try and talk about those the best we can and bring some clarity to it. All right. Anything else there, Bert?
I think that's enough, Phil.
That's a mouthful for the year.
Thanks for being an on-demand viewer of This Week at Work. Don't forget, you can be part of the show by watching live at 7:30 a.m. Central every Thursday morning, when you can get your burning questions answered by using the question mark icon to the right of the player. In fact, you can ask a question now. Head over to aimea.org. Under Member Resources, you'll find This Week at Work. Click Listen Live to register for our next episode and submit a question. Or follow or subscribe wherever you get your news and entertainment. We'll see you next week when we discuss what's happening this week at work.